As you can see, there's a couple different options here. I have my account, so I would be going under login, student login up here in the top right hand corner. And for Hastings, or if your district has any, if your students have Gmail accounts like we do here in Hastings, they just can log in through their Gmail account. So it's pretty quick and easy with them using the same account that they use for their Chromebooks or for logging onto computers. Having them set up an account is very simple. Or I can go sign up, and that's for if you've never used it before. Just go through there. It's pretty simple. A couple questions, make your password, and then you're set from there. I'm going to go to login, and it brings up my account. Even if you're not sure, it says educators only, and this is not for the student login. So they're pretty clear on who is allowed to use the educator login. And they give you another second chance kind of, okay, if you're a student, you need to go this login route. I am an educator and I have my account, so I'm going to go log in. And it's going to take me to this first main screen. My tabs up top are Find Content, My List, Assignments in Progress, and my Class Admin. And I'm going to start under Find Content. And this is where I have my text options and different supports that we talked about a little bit there of vocabulary activities we have not quite covered yet, but ELL support and the step reads and the voice audio. We also have the grades that I can pick and the topics that we kind of talked about. And they've even added some since I've been in here recently, or since I've put together this presentation, but the social and emotional learning would even be a fantastic piece for those students that are still working on some of those areas, not just educational or academic ones, but also social and emotional or behavioral learning. Like I said, stick with a lot of the science. These are what the different reading passages have to them. And then they do all of theirs by a Lexile level. I'm going to start with the search, because within our Science Strong curriculum, one of the articles that we recently did was plate tectonics, or even if I want to search land transformations or land, we've done erosion. I can just go right in up here. If I'm looking for an article either that has been suggested, I can search some of the keywords, or if I'm just looking for an article based on something completely new, I want to try search something. So I'm going to go with plate tectonics. Because this is one that my students did just last week, and it will search and it will give me all my options for plate tectonics. And my first article is actually called Plate Tectonics, Earth and Space Science, but it's a 6th grade reading level. It has one question set, tells me my Lexile and the words. When I did this last week, we did the theory of plate tectonics, and that was the 4th grade level. And it did not have a comprehension question set to it, but it had a vocabulary question set to it, which is a little bit different. I prefer the comprehension ones, but for us too, based on our NWEA data, a lot of our students need to work on some of that academic vocabulary. And this was a good assignment for them to work on, because it kind of threw them for a loop. They really had to think hard about how to use different vocabulary words in the questions that went with those. So it was a good article for my students. I'm gonna actually pick a completely different one, and I'll show you how I would go about assigning it to my class. So I'm gonna search animals, and here's an article of the day set. It has about 6 to 7 articles typically. I've done those, and my students have made a book of knowledge on Google Slides, which is a completely different topic that we could discuss at some point. But they have more articles that the kids can read, and it doesn't really have questions that go with it, but the students type out just short little responses of what they learned from these shorter articles. I'm not looking for an article of the day right now. I'm looking for more of, well, right here. Animal instincts, I could assign to my students. It's a 4th grade level, like I'm looking for. It has 2 comprehension question sets and 2 vocabulary. So I'm gonna take a peek at this one. And when I go in, I can listen to some of it, a preview. I can read the entire article about what I would be assigning to my students. And then if I go back up to the top now, I can also see the vocabulary that they're going to focus on. And Reading Street does a really good job of introducing our students to new vocabulary words, but Readworks also does a great job. Fascinate and instinct, 2 words that I'm pretty confident not all my 4th graders know, and they wouldn't be able to use it in a sentence either, or even in their daily life. And these would be 2 words that my students can go in and they can read about them and what they mean, and how they would use them as verbs, and then even different examples of how it was used. And again, if it's a student that needs it read aloud, they can click on the button here to the side with the microphone and it will play that for them. But it's great for them to be able to have a definition. I do like them to try put it into a kid-friendly version so that way they understand it a little bit better, and then try use it in a kid-friendly sentence. They might not be able to use some of these in these sentences, but they could try put it in their best 4th grade version. Besides fascinate, I have the word instinct, and it's a lot of the same stuff. Definition, an advanced definition, it talks about the part of speech, and then some examples of how it would be used in a sentence. So those are the 2 vocabulary words, and they actually go along with the question set. So I saw the passage, I looked at the 2 vocabulary words that are within this article, and now I look at my question sets. And I have basic comprehension questions, I have author's purpose questions, I have vocabulary questions for fascinate, and vocabulary questions for instinct. I will tell you, I have tried to assign 2 question sets only once, and it failed miserably. I will never fail, or I will never assign more than 1 question set ever again. You can give it a try, but that was even with my 5th graders after I have had them for a year, and it was way too much for them, and they became very frustrated with it. Each one is about 8 to 10, maybe 11 questions. So when I gave them 20 questions, it was overwhelming. So I would suggest sticking with 1. I stick with comprehension the most, but I have done some vocabulary like I did last week. But vocabulary, here's some of the questions they're going to have. Multiple choice is typically the first 8 questions, or sometimes they'll mix in a written response. So number 6 is a written response. 7 is also written response, and then they go back to some multiple choice and vocabulary. So this one's only 9 questions, 6 of them being multiple choice and 3 of them being written response. And that means 6 of my questions, I don't even have to grade at all. Readworks will do it all for me. 3 of my questions, I will have to go back in and grade, but that's where I can provide the key feedback to my students. So, I look at through all this, I can look at author's purpose. That's fantastic because I could even tie it in with Reading Street. There's weeks within Reading Street where we focus on author's purpose. Maybe I want to do a Readworks article that also gives them an extra check on author's purpose. And they can work on a Reading Street week, but also work on science and have author's purpose connected with your Reading Street. You can take 2 subjects and have them tie in together nicely, which is the same thing you can do with the vocab words. Author's purpose, more multiple choice, and it's 1 written response. So maybe you want to start simple with your students and only give them a 5-question test or quiz. I would take a peek and look and see all these different questions. Which ones do you think your students are ready for the most? And I won't show you instinct vocab because these will be similar, but the vocab, more multiple choice, how would they use it in a sentence, which is very much like an M-STEP or NWEA or even a Reading Street assessment. where they have to put the best word into the sentence. Please write your own sentence using Fascinate. I enjoy this part the most with vocab because the kids get very creative. There's many times where I end up being the butt of the written response, where Mr. Kingshot was fascinated by how the students would not stop talking. They can get pretty creative, but they use it in the correct way, and it's never inappropriate, and that's just some of the things that I cover beforehand, before I let them go and type out their own written responses. But they enjoy it, it's pretty creative, so I don't exactly want to curb their excitement with it. So I let them have at it. And then definitely too, what are they going to use to remember the meaning of the word fascinate? It was on our practice one last week, and it really helps the kids to think about, how am I going to remember this vocab word and add it into my language or into my writing? So I'm not going to do a vocab word, but I'm going to choose to assign comprehension questions. I really like those the best. So I've looked at the passage, I've looked at the vocab words, and now I've looked at the question sets. I know what question set I want to pick. I am going to assign it. If I print it, that's going to be a paper copy that I could end up doing with my students. I don't want to do a paper copy. I'm going to go to assign it online. Here's my choices. Now, if I want to do the audio, I can, and I can tell my students, I could assign the audio to my whole class. I could choose the audio and choose specific students. I could even make a group. I haven't made a group yet. I have not made a group. Usually I just pick specific students because I don't have a large number of special ed. I only have about 5 or 6 between our 2 classes. So it's easier to just pick them out. But I could assign the audio to them. I'm not going to assign the audio right now. I'm only doing the comprehension questions. If I wanted 2 sets of questions, then I would put another check mark in. And if I wanted vocabulary 2, then I can do this with the activity. And that would be a 3rd set of questions or a 4th set if I wanted to. I am only going to do comprehension questions. And then I have my class set up, which I will cover next, how you set up a class. But my class is here, it's my only one, and I'm going to assign it today, and I typically give them through the week. Readworks likes to give them 2 weeks, so it's assigned today, and maybe I want to have it due on the 8th. So my whole class, and then I'm going to assign it, and it will say it's been assigned to my whole class, start date, end date, and now I'm all set. Hit OK. If I go back now to my assignments tab up on the top, here's my current assignment that my students have. They have animal instincts. Right now, 0 of my 51 students have submitted it. It's a level Q, or it has a question set, I'm sorry. With my options tab, maybe I want to change the due date. Maybe I don't want my students to see their results as they're coming in, and I want to talk about it the next class. Or maybe I actually did not like that article and I want to delete it altogether and start over. I could do that. As they start to take and read this assessment, we'll go into class results. I'll come back to this in a second, but right now I want to show how we make a class. So,